Hey, Matt Minster here with my trusty assistant. Sorry?
I'm Suzanne, the Magnificent, and this is my trusty assistant, Matt.
That's right. And we're here with easy tips that can save you energy and money.
Like magic.
Adjusting your thermostat 7 to 10 degrees for 8 hours a day can save you up to 10% a year. And a smart thermostat can change the temperature automatically.
Abra Adjusto.
Impressive.
There's more where that came from.
LED light bulbs use up to 80% less energy and can last 25 times longer than regular light bulbs.
Ooh. Ah.
And using timed outlets can help you save even more energy.
Tickety-tockety-two.
Or try Smart Plug. Now these cool devices sync with your smartphone so that you can manage your energy
Ta-da!
with the touch of a finger. Hey, you're pretty good at that.
Thanks. Want to see another trick?
Of course.
Energy savings made easy.
Find more tips at AmeronIllinois.com/savings made easy.
And hello again, everybody. It is time for the Keith Costas podcast starring MLB Network analyst Keith Costas. I'm Bob Ramsey. Glad you're with us. Keith, how are you? And another week has gone by with a ton of things to talk about.
Yeah, all good, Rammer. How's everything back in St. Louis?
Yeah, it's fantastic. And who ever thought that no-nos would be ho-hum?
I know, right? I mean, was like the cliche line yesterday morning, Wednesday, recording this on Thursday. You know, who's going to throw the next no-hitter? Who's going to pitch the no-hitter tonight? It's a given that we're going to break the record, which obviously things are trending towards less and less hits, and we're on a historic pace. But I kind of rolled my eyes at everyone grabbing onto that low-hanging fruit of a narrative, and then fast forward 12 hours, and we've got another no-hitter. So I guess it really is the season of the no-hitter, and you know, you take a look at how these happened. I don't think it's a coincidence that we're talking about 6 no-hitters against 3 teams. There's already 3 teams that have been no-hit twice. So let's keep in mind the competition that some of these pitchers are facing. But yeah, pretty incredible with all the history being made so far this season.
You know, it's funny, and I apologize. I can't remember where I heard it, but one baseball fan to a novice baseball fan, a guy at a ball game, his date, really didn't know anything about baseball, and they're watching a no-hitter, and the guy's going nuts. Hey, it's a no-hitter. He's stopping him, and she says, isn't that what he's supposed to do? And that's sort of where we're going now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about it a little bit last week when we talked White Sox and just the diversity in lineups, and I thought that was one of the more interesting points that I've heard over the last, 10 or 12 days talking about all this, and certainly in the last 24 hours with 2 of the no-hitters. Ron Darling talked about this, just the idea that when he pitched in the 80s and the 90s, you really had to have a game plan of how to navigate the lineup the first time through, the second time through, how you're going to handle these guys, what will you show them when. But with the way some of these lineups are constructed now, you can just go out and let your stuff eat. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened in all of these no-hitters, but that is kind of a theme around the league with some of these teams, especially the weaker offensive teams, which the teams that have been no-hit all kind of fit that bill, Texas, Cleveland, and Seattle. When you can just go out there and there's not the threat that, oh, this guy's going to put the ball in play to the opposite field. This guy might drop a bunt down on you. This guy might work the count and try to stay in the middle of the field. When everyone's trying to launch and turn on everything and hit home runs, and again, that's an oversimplification. Yeah. Obviously, not all 27 hitters in those 3 lineups are like that. But I think the point that we're trying to make here, when there's not the diversity of styles from the hitter's perspective in the lineup, it can be a lot easier for the pitcher to just go out there and figure out what's working for him that day and just go attack. And I think that's played a big role in the overall offensive decline, and certainly in the kind of, I don't know, somewhere between flukiness and history with these no-hitters.
Yeah, somewhere in between. I agree. Covering the Cardinals on a daily basis for such a long time with Dave Duncan as the pitching coach who espoused the pitch to contact philosophy. That is certainly not the way most pitchers or clubs go today and why would you when you've got guys that can throw upper 90s to 100 and have nasty breaking stuff 10, 12, 15 miles off that fastball pace. You could see how all these things could kind of converge into what still may be a statistical anomaly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you just hit on one of the more interesting things that's going on here, and that's that every year, year over year, the percentage of fastballs that guys are throwing keeps going down and down and down. And so you're not just seeing more breaking balls, but the spin rate. And I think part of it is just that they can calculate these things now. Players can go back since 2015 when StatCast came out, and they can see after their start, oh, my spin rate on my slider is up or down, whereas that used to just be, oh, his slider was a little flat today, or he had a sharper breaking ball today. It was more anecdotal and scouting. When these guys can go back and fine tooth comb through their outings and say exactly what my spin rate was, exactly what my velocity was, and then go back into the lab, quite literally into the pitching lab that so many of these teams have, and tweak that and figure out how they can get more spin and how they can be more efficient with their pitches. You see that, that's what's happening around the league. Fewer and fewer fastballs and more effective breaking balls. So that certainly makes it more difficult on the hitters. And then you talked about the Duncan approach of pitch to contact. When these hitters do make contact, the fielders are shifted all over the place. So you're not going to get that bleeder up the middle that might be a base hit to center field that just trickles into center field that you used to have, or the weak ground ball through the hole between first base and second base. I mean, again, same thing as before. It's obviously an oversimplification, but I think you put all that together and it's pretty easy to understand why offense, and particularly the small ball offense, has kind of evaporated, and it's all just homers and launch now compared to where we were even 5-10 years ago, let alone the 20 or 30 years ago that Ron Darling was talking about when he originally made that point.
Yeah, and we already mentioned Dave Duncan, so let's talk about Tony Larussa, his partner for decades, actually many, many decades, since they both came up with the Athletics in the 60s. But talking about Tony Larussa, feeling some heat in Chicago, with one of those unwritten rules, non-respect to the game, however you want to call it. Everybody who's been around Larussa knows he's pretty intense. I still feel like that maybe we had a little bit of overreaction from Tony, from his team, maybe from the Twins, and to me, almost certainly the Chicago media. It seems like everybody got apoplectic over what, to me, I understand where Tony's coming from, and I get where the players are coming from. It's probably not that big a deal, at least to me. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Rammer. I didn't really have too big of an issue necessarily with the points that were being made, and it seemed to be an almost overwhelming consensus against where Tony was coming from. I don't necessarily disagree with those points, but I don't know if I'd say shocked, and disturbed is probably too strong of a word too, but maybe, I don't know, just frustrated or caught off guard by the fervor and the intensity of the reaction. I mean, was it a big deal that he swung 3-0 against a position player? To me, no. And I think to most of the players, no. But I'm with you. I totally understand where Tony's coming from. And let's just take a step back and think about it from a factual perspective. I saw this note over on ESPN this week. There had been something like, I don't know, ballpark here, 500-600 instances in the last 20 years of a team, these exact scenario, leading by more than 11 runs, 3-0 count late in the game. This is the first swing, not the first home run, not the first hit, the first swing in that scenario over the last, 2 decades or so. Now, the game is changing, yes, obviously. But the idea that Tony Larussa is coming from some different planet with the idea that you don't swing in that situation, well, there's literally a 99% rate that would suggest that conventional wisdom does agree with where he's coming from. The players don't swing in those counts. So I just thought it was a little overblown, the way people reacted. And let's go back to last year too, because I do think that some of this, not just some of it, almost all of it, is a product of people having their minds made up about Tony before this season even got started. And again, I'm not saying I agree with him on this particular instance, but people are so quick to jump all over him. Think about last year with the Fernando Tatis 3-0 grand slam. Jace Tingler, who wasn't even alive when Tony managed his first game, he's a 40-year-old manager, essentially said the exact same thing in his press conference last year after the game. He said it's a learning opportunity for Tatis. Wasn't what I would have liked to have seen there. Now, was it as strong as Tony coming out and saying Lance Lynn has a locker, I have an office? No, it wasn't. Did he back off those statements a little bit? Sure, he did. But that's a young guy managing a young team that's sort of from the outside looking in is doing things the new school way, both in terms of the players and the way the franchise itself is run. And you didn't see this type of reaction to Jace Tingler. You saw a lot of discussion around the home run, but Jace Tingler's role in it and his opinion on it was sort of secondary. I understand the circumstances aren't quite the same. He wasn't speaking as strongly as Tony, but I think a lot of it was this preconceived notion of Tony La Russa is going to ruin the White Sox, who, oh, by the way, have the best record in the American League and haven't lost back-to-back games in over a month. So is this isolated incident maybe a source of friction inside the clubhouse? Sure. But overall, is he doing what he was brought there to do? Are they winning? Yes. Have I heard a million people say, well, the players are winning? Of course the players are winning. They're the one that play the game. But they also lost Eloy Jimenez. They also lost Luis Robert. It's not like he's playing with a completely stacked roster. I mean, he's had to deal with some things too, and they're rolling right along. And one other thing I'll throw in there, yesterday after they beat the Twins 2-1, Lucas Giolito, who was one of the younger stars in the team, obviously, and again, from the outside looking in, has apparently had some friction with Tony, or at least that's been a narrative. Tony kept him in too long in a couple outings. He just flat out said, it wasn't in response to a question about Tony, but he said after that game yesterday, I love the way we're going about our business on a day-to-day basis. And isn't that sort of what the manager's job is, to keep the team functioning day to day, to keep the clubhouse running? And remember, you watched him manage long enough. All the fans in St. Louis know that's kind of Tony's MO, wash it away after one night, keep the intensity up the next day. So am I surprised that this became sort of a circus around this one isolated incident? Or I guess it's not an isolated incident. He's brought it on himself in a couple different circumstances this year. But am I surprised it blew up? No, I'm not. Does it change my opinion that the White Sox are going to be very successful for the rest of the season and contend for a World Series? No, it doesn't. And Tony's not going to manage there for 10 years anyways. This was always, whether it worked out or didn't work out, going to be a pretty quick in and out. I think most people would be surprised if he's there for more than 2 to 3 years. So yeah. I just think this idea that he's somehow managing these relationships with the player, no, they have a World Series ready roster. They're going to try to win the World Series this year. There may be some bumps along the way, but I still feel at the end of the day, Tony La Russa is going to be a net positive for that team.
Well said. Let's talk about another couple of teams that may be riding the ship a little bit and playing more to expectations. Certainly, we're talking about the Dodgers, who kind of got hit with some big-time injuries. And interestingly enough, go ahead and sign the player with the best 10-year start in the history of the game, Albert Pujols. Everyone knows he's at the tail end, but he comes in and gets RBIs in his first 2 Dodger starts.
Yeah, the Dodgers definitely getting things going again, and it was almost inexplicable how they got off to that hot start and then fell off. But then you go back, and I think you just hit it. Is it really that inexplicable? They got hit with a ton of injuries. Even the Dodgers' depth can't overshadow Cody Bellinger being out for 6 to 8 weeks, or missing pitching and getting short in a season when guys are trying to come back from a shortened season. So yeah, they had issues just like some other teams around the league, but they've won 7 of their last 8 and they're getting things back on track. And then you go to the other side of the country with the other big favorite, the Yankees, kind of trending in the same direction. Things not going quite as well in the Bronx. Stanton now on the IL, but they've started to right the ship the last couple of weeks. Problem for them is the AL East is a little more crowded than the NL West. Although the NL West certainly has those 3 teams at the top, but it feels like all 3 of those teams are going to be there in the end, and there's some separation between the top 3 and the bottom 2, where the American League East, there's 4 teams that are really fighting for separation, and there's not much separation there between those teams, in my opinion.
Now, I'm going to homer it up a little bit here for my hometown, in your original hometown, St. Louis. And coincidental, the Yankees are playing better. Luke Voigt's back in the lineup. For those who don't know, from suburban St. Louis. And I've been watching. He's doing a BMW commercial. I'm going, our Luke Voigt is doing a Beamer commercial. And one of the first games back, he hits a bomb, and really happy for him. And the Yankees got it going now.
Yeah, I'm with you. Luke Voigt, if you're not up here, I think people would be surprised how big of a deal he is in New York. Like, they're not going to put him in Monument Park tomorrow or anything, but he's a pretty big star in New York. And what surprised me, yeah, it definitely is awesome. And I don't know Luke Voigt personally or anything, but just the impression we always kind of got, the way he carried himself when he was first getting his first taste of the big leagues with the Cardinals, and just what you know about his background, not a big-time prospect or anything. I'm not saying that he carries himself like he's the biggest star in the room, but he's definitely embraced it. I mean, he plays with some swagger and carries himself with some swagger, and why wouldn't he? The guy led the league in home runs last year, played in the Bronx. So, Yeah, it's good to see Luke Voit back in there, and fans have really embraced him up here, and he seems comfortable playing in the biggest market in the country for sure.
So is this surge by the Yankees for real? Is this kind of the way you expected them to play from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, like we just said, Stanton's out now, and he'd been off to a pretty good start. But the
Yeah,
Yankees just at the beginning of the season, they weren't hitting. And this lineup, even when they're missing pieces, I mean, they barely had Judge and Stanton on the field together for a
right.
third of their games, just ballparking it. But they haven't been in the lineup for half of the game since they've been together, not even close to it. They've had one going or the other at given times, but very rarely have they had them both healthy and performing at the same time. So it's not like that's something that they've been used to. They've dealt with this sort of up and down, especially from Stanton injury wise since he's been in New York. But yeah, the team's just too talented and the lineup's just too strong to perform like they did early in the season this year. So I think once the weather warmed up, which it's starting to here, it's been in the mid 80s, creeping up towards 90 the last couple of days, they're going to hit. And you saw Corey Kluber, obviously, last night. Doesn't get much better than that. The pitching's coming around, too. So, yeah, the Yankees are basically ending up right where I thought that they were, starting to come into form. But the Red Sox don't look like they're going anywhere, and that definitely throws a wrench into things in that division.
I know we're 6 weeks into the season, a fourth of the season, but I was one of those who said act with caution when predicting what Nolan Arenado might be doing for the Cardinals, away, out of elevation into sea level. As a full disclosure, I said I thought that the power would still be there and the run production would be there, but I wasn't so sure that he would hit for average and high on base percentage. Well, so far, he's proven me absolutely wrong and that the previous splits are not relevant. As an analyst, is 6 weeks enough to feel pretty good about the way he's hitting?
In a vacuum, I would say no, 6 weeks, not enough. But when
Yeah.
you have a track record like Nolan Arenado and you're playing every single day and being asked to produce the way he was being asked to produce in Colorado, and you're one of the most consistent players in the league, and over your first 6 weeks, your track record basically matches what a very substantial track record already was, then I think you can start to draw some conclusions. And I'm with you, Rammer. I was ready for him to be more of a 25 homer guy, still get his RBIs, still have a lot of volume in terms of hits and extra base hits, because we know he's not all that interested in walking, at least by the standards of a star player who's as feared in the lineup as he is. He wants to get his hacks in. He's not really looking to pass the baton. And I think Cardinal fans appreciate that after watching what they've watched in the middle of the lineup over the last handful of years. So I thought he would take a step back and still be very productive, but it's unbelievable how close the numbers are. I know last night's game skewed it a little bit, but I looked coming into yesterday's game. His on-base percentage was .362, which is exactly what it was over that dominant 5-year peak he had in Colorado. And you project out the numbers on a 162-game pace, he was on pace for 39 homers and 116 RBIs, which is basically right in the range where he was at his peak in Colorado. So, does the fact that he's been red hot over the last week certainly help those projections when you're talking about a fourth of a season? Obviously, he's on pace for double what he was a week ago because he's hit 4 home runs in the last 5 days or whatever it is. But he's basically producing the same that he did at Coors Field in the National League Central. So I think you have to feel very good about that. Even if he takes a step back, the Cardinals have to love what they've gotten from him so far. And he just looks comfortable. I mean, I think fans in St. Louis like hearing this stuff, and it's universal when you talk to people around MLB Network, whether it be my colleagues or former players that we have on the air. It almost looks weird when you see a clip of him from his Colorado days, even though he played, 1,000 games or whatever it was with the Rockies. It almost feels already like he's been a Cardinal forever. It's just such a natural fit, and he certainly seems comfortable in St. Louis.
I don't want to belabor it, and I'm not sure how the metrics would fit. Is it just an eyeball old-time scout test? But the thing I didn't know about him that I do now by seeing him hit every day is his perfect mechanics on going after a ball away in the zone, and the way his body and his head are that way. His head is down, not a modern day slugger who's swinging from their butt and looking to launch everything and pull. Oh, he pulls. We all know that. But when you watch him go the other way and that it's intentional and that the mechanics are perfect, it's really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And I'm always kind of hesitant to go down this road because I think a lot of times we just spend extra time looking at the star players. We have no idea what the 26th man on the roster is doing in the tunnel underneath the game, what he's
Yeah.
working on. We're obviously always going to focus on the stars more, but I did think it was pretty interesting. A couple weeks back, we had some video from our ballpark cams that we have in all 30 stadiums, and we can take a look at 4 o'clock or whatever and see what guys are doing on the field before the gates are open. And Harold Reynolds made a really good point, exactly what you're talking about, kind of watching some of the drills that Nolan did. And he had a coach out there on the big field, 15 feet in front of the plate, just front tossing him balls. Goldschmidt was off to the side, filming him. And it was exactly what you're talking about. You didn't have to be a hitting expert, which I certainly wouldn't call myself a hitting expert. Any casual fan could see what he was doing. And it's exactly what you were talking about. It was head down on the ball, just over exaggerated to the point of tracking the ball. And you're talking about, underhand flips from 10 feet away. He's going back to the simple kind of swing cues that he has. And that certainly seems to be one of them. If you watch him even in real speed, you can see that he tracks the ball and his eyes are almost, just locked in more so than the average hitter. It's hard to pick up on things for the average fan at the speed the game's played at, but I totally agree with you. His ability to track the ball deep in the zone and stay locked in is something that really stands out getting to watch him play every day.
Let's put a bow on the show by circling back to Chicago, but going to the north side. You take it any way you want to go. I'll throw out in broad context. I still feel like, even though I know changes are going to come eventually, but I feel like the demise of the Cubs has been exaggerated a little bit. Give me an overall view of what you think of the Cubs right now.
Well, I think the interesting thing with the Cubs and what you're kind of hinting at is that people talked so much about, this is coming to an end, the window's closing, et cetera, and Chris Bryant was always at the center of that. But now all of a sudden you look up and Chris Bryant's Chris Bryant again. So what are they going to do? Could they potentially have a scenario where they somehow are interested in bringing him back at what looks like will be a number that people would have predicted for him, 2-3 years ago, as opposed to when he was struggling last year? Or do they swallow hard and say, no, we're going to strike while the iron's hot, and all of a sudden Chris Bryant is like a JD Martinez-esque trade chip, like when Arizona got him 5-6 years ago, and all of a sudden you're talking about one of the best hitters in the league going to the highest bidder at the trade deadline. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, I'm with you, Rammer. Are they as good as they were a few years ago? Obviously not. They have a flawed roster, and guys have struggled that we're not used to seeing struggle over the last year, albeit under strange circumstances. But they can still mash when they're rolling. The lineup has not been perfect, has not been great at times this season. Their pitching staff has had some of the same problems as the Cardinals, way too many walks, especially from the relievers. But this lineup, when Baez and Bryant and Rizzo then becomes kind of a secondary guy, or when Rizzo's your third guy with those two guys going, Contreras, who I think when he's healthy, has a claim. I know everyone loves JT Realmuto, and with good reason, but Contreras is as good as any catcher in the game to me.
I agree.
When he's playing well, he's so athletic. You saw that throw he made last night against Washington. He's got an absolute cannon, and he's just, again, same kind of deal as Realmuto. He's super athletic, which you don't see from catchers, and he can obviously hit for plenty of power. So do I think the Cubs are going to be in it at the end of the season? Probably not. But are they a team to be taken lightly? Absolutely not. They could still, would it surprise me if the Cubs swept the Cardinals this weekend? No, not at all. I mean, first of all, it's baseball. Anything can happen, but I'm with you. The demise of the Cubs has been kind of an over-reported story, and I think people putting the cart before the horse a little bit tried to read the writing on the wall and just assume Chris Bryant was dead in the water, and that's obviously not the case.
Keith Costas, what's next on MLB Network?
Just keep plugging away with more games. We've got, I told you a couple weeks ago about the MLB Tonight style game that we did. We've got one coming up next week that's going to be more of like a sabermetric angle to it. Not quite what they do on ESPN on Sunday nights, but more like a studio blend. If you watch MLB Now with Brian Kenny, it'll kind of be that crew presenting the game. So that should be fun next week. And then just back to the regular flow of things as the season really gets into high gear here.
Keith, great to see you as always. We'll talk again next week, talking more MLB with the Keith Costas podcast. And he is, of course, the analyst from MLB Network. Thanks, Keith. Talk to you soon.
You got it, Rammer. See ya.